Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. In today's video I'm going to be ranking the albums of Swallow the Sun. You could never have guessed that from, well, probably from the title of the video for one thing, but also the fact I'm wearing my Swallow the Sun t-shirt for the occasion. Now Swallow the Sun have been around for 21 years. They were formed in 2000 by Uraivio, the lead guitarist. And their lineup has stayed more or less the same. I think they've had a couple of changes to their drummer, but it has stayed pretty much the same. So I think their sound therefore has stayed fairly similar throughout their years, although they have become, I'd say, slightly more polished in production, and they have certainly made use of melody and folk in some of their and folky sort of music in the more recent albums. I'm thinking of one or two in particular, I think, but anyway, that's sort of a very brief introduction to this band. And this is another band who, you know, they don't really have any bad albums. There are definitely no stinkers here at all. A bit like with a couple of the other bands I've done this kind of video for, where I'm trying to order from least favourite to favourite their albums. It's incredibly difficult because for Swallow the Sun, there really are no bad albums at all. So how to do this with such a great band? Well, I do have an order. Of course, it's subjective, so therefore you may disagree with this, and you are welcome to put your own order in the comments if you know, a big fan of Swallow the Sun and you have a particular order yourself. For me though, I'm going to start this off now and name my least favourite album of Swallow the Sun, and it is Ghosts of Loss. Their 2005 sophomore release. This was a really sort of, well, you know, pretty heavy album as far as all of the Swallow the Sun albums go. I mean, they all, you know, feature the harsh, pretty much all of them I think feature harsh growls and heavy, pretty crunchy, doomy riffs. But this particular album certainly is weighted towards that side much more than some of their others. For me, I really like the first two tracks, maybe include track 3 as well, you know, The Giant, Descending Winters, Psychopath's Lair. Really like those tracks, but then the momentum for me of this album, it doesn't quite stay there. I mean, I just think there's a slight loss of momentum as the album goes on for me. It slows down a lot. I know they're doom metal, I know that, but there's just something that's a little bit of that spark magic from the opening 3 tracks that I didn't feel was quite retained for the rest of this album. So that's my number 7 choice. Number 6 for me is Hope, the album which came straight after Ghosts of Loss, and this is you know, a really good album. Can I just say that straight off the bat? I do really enjoy it. It has an amazing track, features Jonas Renkser of Catatona on vocals, which is another reason I really enjoy this album, and particularly that song, What a Cracking Swallow the Sun song, probably one of my all-time favourite Swallow the Sun tracks, that one. In fact, the first half of this album, again, a bit like with Ghosts of Loss, the starting tracks are amazing, but as you get towards the second half, I felt like, again, there was a slight loss of momentum for me with this album, and that's why I'm just putting it slightly lower down at number 6, and it's why it doesn't quite feature in my favourites of my favourites. So what comes next? My number 5 choice is actually a bit of a surprise. So this might be the shock choice in the list, because I think this is a lot of people's favourite Swallow the Sun albums, from, you know, a few people that I have seen review Swallow the Sun and do a similar thing. I think New Moon, though, for me, how can I put this into words? I do enjoy a good portion of this album, and again, like with the last 2 albums, it's pretty strong. It's a great doom metal album, but it doesn't quite stick out for me. I haven't returned to New Moon as much as I thought I might have would after my, you know, early listens to that album. You know, there are a couple of Swallow the Sun classics on here. Sleep the Swans would be one that I would name as a favourite Swallow the Sun track on here, and Lights on the Lake, amazing song as well, one of their horror series of tracks that they tend to on some of their albums, and this one is a great track, with the elements of Swallow the Sun that I think you'd be looking for in a Swallow the Sun track. Otherwise, though, you know, there are other good tracks on this album, a really good opening track, but it just doesn't quite do it. It doesn't quite make my upper half, my upper tier of Swallow the Sun albums, and for that reason, it's at number 5. So what comes next? Number 4. For me, it's their latest album, When a Shadow is Forced into the Light. This album sort of had, you could sense on this, I think, the grief that the band, and that Juha in particular, was probably feeling, having, you know, lost his partner, Alea Starnbridge, the singer who obviously made, you know, a lot of contributions to this band as well. And I think you can certainly feel the grief in that, and in one of the EPs they did as well, and I'm not including EPs on this list, but the EP that came out sort of slightly before this full-length album, you can also sense that that loss has probably had a pretty massive impact on this band. But it is absolutely beautiful. I mean, music-wise, it's a great Swallow the Sun album. Why isn't it in my top 3, I suppose, if I'm going to try and explain the order of this? I guess it doesn't quite, for me, match the epic proportions of my top 3 albums, I think. As it gets towards the very end of the album, again, there's something with a regular theme with my rankings of Swallow the Sun albums here. I love all their albums, but at the end of the albums, I sort of sometimes feel like they lose some of the spark that they have with the strong, kind of these strong, really earlier tracks. And then as you get towards the end again, it doesn't quite maintain it. And for me, I think it was the last couple of tracks on this album that it didn't quite hit me the same. But most of this album, I think I would say more than just the first half, are pretty amazing. I love Stone Wings. Upon the Water is... I remember hearing that track for the first time. That's one of those tracks you remember when you hear it the first time, because it's so good. It's a knockout. That one. What else have we got on this great album? Crimson Crown. Lovely melodic track, that one, with a beautiful guitar solo in its kind of interlude. Amazing song. So yeah, top album. I think it was even number 2 on my album of the year list for 2019. So it's no slouch at all. But yet, on this great band's discography, comes in at number 4 of 7. What's number 3 then? Well, number 3, I have selected Emerald Forest and the Blackbird, with a lovely artwork. I really like the artwork of this one. I don't know why, but I just really do. It's kind of that eye of the it's the eye of the blackbird. Really like this one. Really got one of those big atmospheric doom metal openers with the title track of the album, and then the tracks that follow are pretty good as well. Cathedral Walls, of course, featured Annette Olson, formerly of Nightwish, on vocals. You get sort of a couple of quicker up-tempo tracks on this album, so it sort of feels like there's a nice bit of diversity on this album, actually, and I think that's possibly why it's high up on my list as number 3. That's one of the reasons anyway. But it also has 2 tracks from Swallow the Sun that I would definitely have in my top 10, perhaps even my top 5 Swallow the Sun tracks. Labyrinth of London, Horror Part 4. Just love this song. Even the spoken word bit, which a lot of people don't like spoken word bits of songs, but I find it works well in this song. It's kind of poetic. I think the sort of atmosphere of the song is not lost by this section, and it kind of stays, the music stays up pace with the spoken word bit, I think. I'm not even sure I've kind of explained that brilliantly, but then there's that lovely guitar solo as well afterwards, as usual, just genius work with the guitars here. It's Labyrinth of London, classic track, which incidentally, I'm a Londoner myself, totally appreciate that track, totally appreciate it. April the 14th has to have a mention here. I can't not mention this song. And why on earth is it not mentioned more often? This is a tribute to Peter Stills of Typo Negative, and it is it's an amazing song. One of the most incredibly understated but powerful choruses I think I've heard from Swallow the Sun. Yeah, and it brings to an end, apart from Night Will Forgive Us at the very end of the album, just an amazing sort of closing stages of this album as well. And in a way, I'm surprised this is just number 3. It says something about the top 2 albums, that is just number 3. That. Anyway, what's my number 2 choice? Well, what an incredible debut album this was. The Morning Never Came. Just pipped to the post. Emerald Forest and the Blackbird. Can't get my words right again. But yeah, incredible debut album. Pretty fierce. This is more of a, this is one of their more heavy albums because it's an early album. It's the first, so they came out of the blocks, hitting hard on the heavy guitars and the drums. Pretty kind of some really crushing stuff on here. Deadly Nightshade's got a kind of great groove to it. Just realised actually Nightshade is not spelt right. If I was going to nitpick on the back of this CD, it says Nightshade. Unless that was what I just saw. I'm sure it's meant to be Deadly Nightshade. One for you in the comments to correct on. I think it must be Deadly Nightshade, surely. It's a classic though. I love that song. It's amazing. Swallow Horror Part 1, seen them play that live. Quite an experience. Obviously all their horror parts are pretty amazing tracks. The title track, Morning Never Came, Under the Waves, Hold This Woe. I love Morning Never Came. Yeah, and I think out of their early albums as well, it is their best. So that leaves one album, or does it? Because this is a triple album, so in a way it leaves 3 albums, but it was a triple album, all came together in one. Pièce de Résistance, a magnificent Swallow the Sun piece of work, with 3 classics in one, if you like. Songs from the North 1, 2 and 3, and yeah, great album cover as well there. Gloom, the first disc, has what you maybe expect or would expect from Swallow the Sun at this time, with a mixture of the melodic and the heavy, a mixture of the melodic doom with the deathier stuff, really crushing riffs, as always, heartstring shattering. With You Came the Whole of the World's Tears. Again, that is just a top Swallow the Sun track, that one. But this carries on with this beautiful sound, this album, throughout. You go into the second disc, Beauty, which is a bit like Swallow the Sun's kind of Damnation, Damnation by Opeth, that is, with, all clean, these kind of folky tracks, infusing some slight classical elements into them as well, and they are just some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard on here, on disc 2. Really wonderful stuff, and that disc is possibly what has pushed this to top spot, because I love all of the discs here, including 3, Despair, the Funeral Doom disc, the really sort of slow, crushing, despairing album on this triple disc. But all 3 great albums in their own right. I think I had to put this top. It was number 2 of my albums of the decade list for the 2010s as well, so that sort of indicates how much I appreciate this album and how much I love it, for it to be that high up in albums of the decade. So that's it. That's my Swallow the Sun picks and my rankings of Swallow the Sun. Hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free as ever to like and subscribe. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe see you next time. Take care, everybody.